Alrighty folks, so just a very quick thing before we get started. As I was saying earlier, there is a very limited amount of wonderful stuff there from the guys at Zend, including some lovely little red elephants. Now we've got a vase of destiny up at the back there near the reception area, which Dane is kindly holding aloft, wielding it as it would be, yes, absolutely. So please, take a business card, pop it in there if you haven't already done so. And if you pop in too, well, that's going to be messy. But yeah, I think from that point of view, if you haven't already done it, you know where it is, please do so, and then we'll get Andy to draw them out. It's the fairest way to do it. So first of all, just wanted to welcome all of you guys here tonight, because we've been really excited about this meetup. It's the first time that Andy's actually been out here to Australia and to Sydney first off. Got a busy week ahead of him. He's going to be at the Continuous Delivery meetup tomorrow night, and then also he's going to be down in Melbourne on Thursday for the meetup there. So lots of things happening. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from him on all the topics that he's going to be talking with us about tonight. So first off, as I say, welcome to all of you guys. Great to see you here. And also big thanks as well to Formation. Okay, I'm a little bit biased because I'm the technical director there. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dave Clark. I'm the organizer for Sydphp PHP, and the night tonight was organised by myself and Jack Skinner, and the venue and all of the lovely beer and pizza that's been provided by Formation. And so big thanks to Formation, to Dane particularly for doing that. Thank you. So really, just to give you a bit of an idea about some of the things that have been going on. Some of you might be aware that there was a PHP conference a little bit closer to home than usual just a few weeks ago, and got back just the other week from it. It was held in Wellington. It was the first PHP conference in New Zealand, and I'd been asked to go along to that and talk alongside another couple of speakers from Australia, and it was a really exciting experience. It went really, really well, and I think what it's done as well is just really put fuel in the fire to say we need to have something even closer to home, something in Australia. So just a real quick show of hands, guys, if there was a conference to be going ahead in Australia, I can see a hand up there already. How many of you guys would come along? Yeah, that pretty much says it all, and that's exactly something that we're going to be working towards making happen as well. It's something that's going to require cooperation between all the meetup groups across Australia, and we're going to push forward and make that happen. But the topic that was closest to my heart and has been over the past few months is very much about the idea of API first. And for some of you guys that might make sense, and for some of you guys, that might be a bit of a new concept. But the thing is, the age of traditional applications where you had your view logic coupled together with your business logic, they're gone, right? You can't be building applications like that anymore. If you are, you're really doing it wrong, okay? The future is all about having truly separated concerns. It's about this API first approach. It's about making sure that you're in a situation where you can be agile with what you're offering in the marketplace. So for developers, okay, you might be in a situation where you're working for a company with an internal product. Okay? You might be in an agency environment like we are, where we're working with a number of different clients, trying to help them develop the market they work within and really make a difference and an impact, to disrupt the market in some cases. And to really make that happen, what it comes back to is promoting this idea of reuse. You've gone to the effort of understanding the business logic, the real niche concerns so much that you've developed these services, they really hit the mark. And then what do you do? Okay? If your next thing is to say, oh yeah, we're just going to copy and paste this bit of logic here and put it there, doing it wrong, right? It's so easy now to reuse services. And the thing that I was in New Zealand talking about in particular was a tool called Apigility. Now, a lot of you guys know that Zend framework for me is the framework of choice, right? It's the framework that I use because I find it's really easy to write extensible code. You guys, regardless of the frameworks you work with, these days it's a modern framework. You're in a situation where you can benefit from the namespaces that are out there. You can avoid collisions with code and very quickly and easily replace one component with another where it shares a common interface. These are common concepts that a lot of us who've been developing for a while already know. For those people who maybe just entered into that space, it's a very new thing. So the thing that I was most keen to promote was this idea of using a rapid API development tool, and that for me is what Apigility is. In this day and age, we're in a situation where we've got to think about mobile devices as well as desktop applications, as well as whatever kind of application. Maybe it's the Internet of Things, right? All the things. We've got to be in a position where we can provide data and be able to update data. We've got to be able to reuse and promote that reuse. So that, for me, is something I'm very excited about. Andy was going to talk a little bit about it, but folks, given the fact that I've talked about it very recently in New Zealand, I thought it was probably a good idea at the next Sydphp PHP meetup, and we are actually going to have another one this month towards the end. We're going to be talking about 5.6, PHP 5.6, some of you guys might know, was released, and in fact was released on the day of the New Zealand conference, which was particularly exciting because the keynote was delivered by none other than Rasmus Lerdorf himself. For anybody who doesn't know, 1993, a guy called Rasmus Lerdorf came up with a way of being able to, work with dynamic content and web pages. Just something that we all ended up, making a career out of. So, and it was really interesting hearing him talk because his keynote was all about coding and dreaming, right? And coming up with this way of injecting dynamic content into web pages, and then the world just really took that and ran with it. People were saying, "Hey, but could you not just do this? And could you not just add some conditional logic, would allow us to do this?" And so it would grow and grow and grow. And one of the things that he talked about was how people would look at PHP and say that it was terribly inconsistent, but what he would say is it's actually consistently inconsistent. So, you take the chance to actually look at some of these functions, and you'll see that it actually corresponds back to functionings from the actual C modules and stuff like that. It's really quite interesting when you get that extra perspective. So, needless to say, it was an awesome experience, really, really great, and we are going to have another PHP meetup this month. We're going to have it on the last Thursday of the month, which I believe is the 26th. And it's going to be 5.6. We're also going to talk about Apigility more. So rather than have Andy go into it in any detail, we'll actually look at some demonstrations of how quickly we can get an API endpoint up and running with the API builder. But enough from me. I'm sure you've probably had enough of me.
Never do.
No. Okay. Fantastic. More. No. Okay. Really just want to say a big thank you to Andy for making the journey over here to talk with us. I'm really looking forward to hear what he's got to share with us. I'm sure you are too, so please give a big round of applause here for Andi Gutmans, CEO and co-founder of Zend.
Great, thanks a lot. So I'm really happy to be here, first time in Sydney, in Australia actually. And it's been a great experience so far. 36 hours in, but we've already had time to do some sightseeing. I have an interesting way of describing Australia to my wife, but I'm not sure I may get heard if I describe it. But you are a bit of a mashup between the UK and the US, just a lot more relaxed. So there are a few things I wanted to talk about today. It's not going to be all PHP. Actually, one of the things I wanted to talk about a bit is continuous delivery, because I think it's where PHP plays and something that's very important to us. But before I get started, I just wanted to introduce myself in a bit more detail. So first, I'm a computer science graduate, studied at the Israel Institute of Technology. That's also where we started to work on PHP. Zev and myself discovered PHPFI, which was the work that Rasmus did. We were going to write this shopping cart. This was back in 1997. Loved the idea, started using it, and we felt like, great idea, but we could actually improve it. We just finished a compiler course. And that's when we started to work on the runtime that was running PHP 3. And that really became kind of the next generation PHP project. Went to 1.5 million domains. Probably about the same time as PHP 3 shipped, we looked at our work and said that was crap, we could have done it better. So, we felt we could improve the runtime of what Rasmus did, but once we shipped, we saw what we did wasn't that good either. So we did the next reincarnation, which was PHP 4, And in PHP4 we actually coined the term the Zend engine, which was the kernel of PHP. So most people don't even remember. I would say PHP3 was the Zend engine 0.5, and PHP4 ended up being Zend engine 1. So that's kind of where PHP came up. I love Java. It surprises a lot of folks. And the Java I love is this Java, not the other one. So I actually did a fair share of Java development in WebSphere when I was in the Israeli army, and I have a lot of scars to show. It's the worst experience I ever had. I still wake up at night screaming, remembering Java. But this Java is great. I'm actually a hobbyist barista. So one thing that I immediately reported back that every place I go here have great La Marzocco machines, and you guys have great coffee. This is actually what I make at home. It's not a Google Images picture. That's my latte art at home. Every morning I wake up, my wife and I have a nice cup of coffee. And you can also say there's life after high tech. If technology goes away, people are still going to drink coffee. So, I've got good job security. My career path is very clear. And I talked a bit about this. And one thing that most people don't know about me is I'm actually quad citizen. And I always get these questions, how is that possible? So first of all these countries like each other most of the time. So I was Swiss born, British crazy mother. Moved to Israel when I was 10, and then moved to the US 10 years ago. So, and I almost didn't get into Australia because I actually changed my name somewhere on the way. I was born Andre, and from the minute I was born, I was always called Andy, so I decided at some point, if everyone calls me Andy, I may as well just call it Andy. So my Swiss and British passport are still Andre, and then I changed it here, and then when I got the green card and citizenship here, I got Andy. So my ticket here was booked under Andy, but I tend to be lazy, which actually it's good to get into continuous delivery in DevOps because it's all about laziness and repetitiveness. I said, okay, I could go through a hassle with the American passport, pay money, or I could use my British passport and just get the visa online and get it really quickly. What I didn't add up is that the names are actually different. So I was checking in my flight as Andy, giving them an Andre passport, and they didn't know what to do with it. So somehow I managed to convince them to get me on the flight. Obviously the immigration here, I only showed them one passport, and so here I am. A bit about Zend. Zend stands for Zev and Andy. So you can guess whose father came up with the name. You can see who's got the front seat there? Not me. So Zev's father came up with the name, put me on the back, and the rest is history. And then, as I said before, the Zend engine is the kernel of PHP. PHP4 was Zend engine 1, PHP5 Zend engine 2, and now we're kind of not quite sure what it is, but PHP7 will probably be Zend engine 3. And I've been involved in quite a lot of open source projects, so it's not only PHP, also helped jumpstart Zend Framework, Apigility, Eclipse PDT, also early contributor to MySQL. So for those who use the MySQL client and you have tab completion, in the clients, there's still a bit of my code in there. So it actually uses some of the hash implementation we use in PHP. And last time I checked, it was still there. I never signed the contributor license agreement for Oracle. So when they say they have all the IP rights, I'm not quite sure. But I guess it's another very important part of MySQL, so they probably don't care. And then also was part of the Apache Software Foundation and actually did a bit of minor contributions to Apache. And then what we do as a company, we really focus on supporting business critical workloads. So we basically contribute a lot to open source, and for companies who are running business critical apps, we add value on top of that. And that value can be around support, long-term support, security fixes, and then a lot of capabilities around automation, management, and so on and so forth. So what I wanted to talk about today is how the world is changing. And by the way, I have time for Q&A afterwards, so if I don't cover what you want to know about PHP, we have some time afterwards, but I'm actually going to talk mostly around, I would say, the world that PHP lives in. Because for me, it's been, what's been interesting around this journey is when we started, probably 5% of development was being done for web. Open source was not accepted in enterprise. Dynamic languages were called scripting languages, and no one wanted to touch them. So it's a pretty lonely place. I mean, now it kind of seems obvious. Enterprise likes dynamic languages, but even 5 years ago, enterprise architects would, go Java, 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 nothing else works. But the world is changing, and what you'll see is, and I'll talk about that, is enterprise is starting to really understand it. There's a lot of pressure around that. The big ISVs like IBM and Microsoft and Oracle are understanding that, and that's creating a great place to be as a PHP developer, because that's driving a lot of requirements that folks that are growing up around dynamic languages and PHP have a lot more value than what they did in the past. So what's really changing is software is disrupting everything. And there's actually Mark Andreessen in the Wall Street Journal. I think we have a News Corps guy here. Wrote a big, nice article around software eating the world, how software is transforming pretty much every industry. And what you can basically see is that's true, and you're seeing every industry, even the most traditional industries, are being disrupted. Today we used Uber here twice, right? It was kind of this weird situation. There was like this long taxi stand, 10 cabs waiting, and we already ordered an Uber, and he was like parking in the front, and we just walked in. Yeah, I almost felt bad for the taxis, like I'm part of destroying the world. But this is happening in every business, and every business is being disrupted, like real estate. Most people don't think about LinkedIn, but LinkedIn, all the recruiters and everything are really having a hard time. And Zend, I would say 10 years ago, almost everything went through recruiters. Now, I would say 90% of our hires we're doing ourselves in-house through LinkedIn. Probably 10% we do through recruiters if it's specific skill sets that are hard to find. But it's all being done in-house. Now, it doesn't mean jobs are going away because we have an in-house recruiter. But it does mean that the nature of the work is changing, and that creates new opportunities, but it creates a lot of threats for all the incumbents. And I think one thing that people often talk about is, okay, everyone, none of this is news. Everyone knows they're being disrupted. The enterprise knows they're being disrupted. So why are they still being disrupted, right? Why are they surprised versus why are they not just disrupting ahead of time? And this is actually a really interesting way to kind of understand why it's happening. So if you look at, kind of the music industry, in 2010, the music industry was a market of 32 billion. The projection is that by 2017, that market is going to be 26 billion, right? Now for the incumbent, they're basically losing about 6 billion of market and opportunity. So the resistance to change is really, the motivation for change initially is not there, because at least in the first few years, they're hoping that they can slow things down. And by the way, can you guys hear me in the back? Okay, these mics are hard. And for the newcomer, this is great, right? They see a $26 billion market opportunity. And that creates a big asymmetry between the new guy, who doesn't really care where the market is today, 26 billion is great, versus the incumbent who's going to lose 6 billion. And so what consistently happens is that companies know it, they're not dumb, but they just can't act on it fast enough, because acting fast enough is actually accelerating this decline, which for them is a threat, versus for the newcomer, who it's an opportunity. Now I think slowly but surely companies are seeing it and waking it up. And one of the biggest challenges here is that for the new guys, right, being able to, first of all, you have about 10x innovators than you did in the past. I mean, the world is flat. You can innovate from pretty much anywhere. You don't even need a garage anymore. You just need Wi-Fi. Okay. You can do it at the 10th of a cost. I mean, the cost of starting infrastructure was probably about 25K for a real app about 10 years ago. Like, you needed a couple of servers, you needed an Oracle license, you needed a some kind of JBoss or something like that, and you get to about 25K. Right now, you spin up an Amazon instance, you can get started like $40 a month, and if you're successful, then you don't care because you're going to pay more, but you're paying as you're succeeding. So the barrier of entry is very, very low. And then you basically have an infinite amount of compute power. So that's kind of the world that we live in. And when we look at this at Zend, we think, wow, this is our opportunity, right? This is the opportunity of Zend, this is the opportunity of the PHP market, because we know how to do this, right? We know how to deal with the new world and transform businesses that are mobile first, API first, cloud centric, social, and that's exactly what these companies need to do. I mean, just to give you one more example, one of our customers is from a pretty archaic IBM system. They're one of the biggest avocado sourcers in the US. So you think about, that's a really old industry, it's avocados, it's low tech. But you think about what they can do by moving to mobile, having all their drivers with mobile devices, optimizing the routes as trucks are picking up produce, tracking it all the way to the point of sale, and knowing which produce is selling better than others. That's part of business model innovation that's happening right now. I mean, every business can either, it's not only a disruptor disrupted, but they can disrupt themselves and become a lot more efficient and a lot more successful and actually build new business models. So that's a huge positive impact, huge opportunity. It's actually an opportunity for everyone here. Now, what's happening in this kind of architecture is you have in most cases, you have your existing system of record. So you have your ERP, your CRM, or so on and so forth. But what companies are trying to do is trying to figure out how do we unlock the value that we have, because their competitive advantage is actually they have the information. They have the information internally. But then how do we repurpose that information to be contextual, personalized, real-time, to really create this differentiating value? And that's where PHP is really, really good. So because the nature of these applications tend to be composite apps, so they're not just extending the existing system to mobile, right? There's kind of this, I would say, there was this mobile 1.0 idea where people felt like, oh, I put a few APIs on my backend system, I consume it from a mobile device, and now I'm mobile. If you really want to be mobile, what I call kind of mobile 2.0, you have to deliver a contextual, personalized, real-time experience. If you're looking up some data in your warehouse, it should know which location you're at. It should already know, what department you're working in, and it should be giving you much more contextual data than what it used to. So one thing PHP is extremely good at building out composite apps. We have connectors to everything. We worked with IBM, with Oracle, with Microsoft to get connection into all those environments. We have great connectors to technologies like MongoDB, Redis, MySQL, of course, is what PHP and PHP grew up with. But there's a few other things that need to happen here. So I kind of look at dynamic languages and PHP specifically as a great fit for building this new generation of apps. And it's a different way of thinking. Even though PHP grew up on the web, I see a web interface as still kind of the old way of doing it. And what was mentioned before is you got to start building out an API-centric architecture, right? You got to start building out APIs here that can then be consumed by different mobile devices, by desktops, by cars, by do third-party integrations. And then last but not least, the pace here has to be incredibly fast. right? You don't have time. You don't have time to go away and build an application over 12 to 18 months. First of all, you don't have time. Second, you really don't know how to anticipate what users really want. So even in enterprise, the manager may think he knows what he wants. The reality is once that mobile app actually gets into the market, there's a lot of feedback. So being able to deal with that kind of feedback cycle is very, very important. And so kind of as a result of all of that, we sat back at Zend and said, okay, PHP is great for this, right? We're seeing more and more enterprise customers come to us because even though they're Java incumbents, and a lot of our enterprise customers kind of came from the Java world, they can't get this done at the right pace with Java. So Java's not going away. It's going to continue to run the system of records for many, many years, and so on. But enabled to really increase the pace of innovation, they need to do something else. But we also believe as a company that it's not just about the language. Other things have to exist around language and the ecosystem to really enable this kind of new generation of development. So we basically focused on 3 key areas as a company to help enable our customers. Some of these pieces are open source, some of them are in our commercial products. But I'm not going to talk too much about our products today, but really talk about what the idea is behind these things and why they're important. So the first one was mentioned. We call it REACH, but it's the whole notion of building API first, right? HTML first applications are a thing of the past. You really shouldn't be building HTML first applications anymore. You have to transition to an API-centric architecture. That is incredibly hard to do. I mean, we have customers that are very forward-looking, very innovative. Companies like Disney that have built mobile apps at a very high quality for many years. But even within those organizations, building APIs the right way there's always a friction and tension going on around that. How do you version? How do you do error handling? How do you do security? How do you build APIs that are future-proof? Because the whole idea is you build an API once, but it helps you future-proof your whole environment. So then you're going to hear about, not from me today, but the next time. But what we basically did was we codified those best practices into a project called Apigility. Apigility is free, it's open source, it's built on Zend framework, and it really helps companies build APIs the right way. It's incredibly easy to use, and we've basically taken the best practices and codified them for you. The second piece is scale, is really making sure that when you're building out your application, you don't have to worry too much about performance and scale. If you have a mobile application that's incredibly successful, you just want it to succeed. You don't want to have to think too much about how to scale the application. So there's a lot of focus we put on that. And then the third, which I think is probably the most important, is agility. And that is really focused around continuous delivery and DevOps. And I'm going to talk a lot about that today, is how do you as a company build out a delivery capability that helps you innovate at a pace to actually be successful. And I'll give you an example of what one of the disruptors at what speed they innovate at, and you'll see that for enterprises that is incredibly scary. And by the way, this is a feel-good slide as a PHP developer. These are just some examples of the companies that have embraced PHP in a very strategic manner. These are all clients of ours, but these are companies who are really doing PHP at scale in a very, very big way. So let's talk a bit about the need for agility. So I think we talked about the macro need of disruption, and every business is starting to rethink its business model. But what really happens is you got the manager or the business leader. As I said, the business leaders aren't dumb. They do understand that they're getting disrupted, and they even have a pretty good idea on what they want, right? And they have this grand vision, and they come to you as the developers and say, hey, how long is it going to take you to develop this? And usually what they'll say is, hey, we need it tomorrow morning because the market's, there's disruption happening, we need this fast, can't take too much time to code this thing. The idea was the big challenge. Now we know what we want to do. We have to do it incredibly fast. So now it's on your table. And now the question is, okay, how do you do this, right? And there's two ways to write code. One is write it the right way, and the other one is write it fast. So of course, with your boss, hitting you on your head, asking for the code to come out quickly, the natural inclination is to go the fast route, right? And so you're writing it fast, you're coding, you're not really, you're going as fast as you can. Does it work? Does it work? No, no, no. At the end, you deliver something, but it's kludgy, it doesn't really scale, it doesn't really work. And you basically say, you know what, we got to rewrite this thing. It's a nice POC, but we got to rewrite it. This time we're going to do it the right way. Okay? So you decide to do things the right way. The problem is, it takes a very, very long time. You're doing waterfall, you got a nice project plan, you're doing very detailed MRDs, PRDs, product definitions. By the way, I've done those kind of things, 150-page PRDs. It's great. Just there's one problem. By the time you deliver the product, it's not what the market needs anymore. So there's actually a real challenge, right? There's a real challenge where neither coding fast or coding right actually works. And that's really the challenge that has to be resolved. So what I like doing is taking an example of a company that's disrupted. And we used to know Amazon as a bookstore, right? Now it's one of the most successful online retailers, right? They've gone into payments. They've disrupted multiple markets. Of course, they've also disrupted the hardware market, okay? But there's one thing that makes Amazon very, very unique, and that is their application delivery capability. No matter what market they decide to go into next, and they're constantly going into adjacent markets, they have a pace of innovation that even when the incumbents see that pace of innovation, they can't keep up. And I'll give you an example, like the CIO of Nordstrom, which is a very large fashion retailer in the US, said, we see fashion trends 3 months ahead of time, right? Before anyone else sees them, but by the time we deliver them, Amazon's already beaten us to it. And that's really the big problem. And probably the main reason is Amazon delivers code into production, working code into production every 11 seconds. And that is an old stat. So my guess is it's probably every 4 or 5 seconds now. So what scares these big companies now is, okay, you see the new born on the web companies who are delivering at every 11 seconds. How can we even keep up? Even agile development, right? Most of these companies are really feeling good about themselves because they just finished adopting agile development and doing Scrum meetings and stand-ups and so on. But it's a fallacy, because what happens with agile development, you're feeling good on the dev team, right? But then once you're done, it goes into testing, and it takes time, and it releases it to operations, and it takes a lot of time, and you got a lot of problems, and the whole thing, the whole cost of release is extremely expensive, and so most companies can't handle releases more than every 3-4 months, kind of working the old way, and even that is probably a good, that's even when they're doing things very, very well. And so where companies really need to move to is building out a continuous delivery capability, and I'll talk about that in more detail, but really look at that whole delivery capability as one unit, right? When you write code, you have the testing, you have the release automated, you have everything done, everything is automated in a very, very clear manner. So you're actually taking out the risk of errors, and you're able to move much, much faster. And I'll talk a lot more in detail on how that's done, But really, the main thing to take away from here is that mobile and mobile-first development is a very incremental cycle. It's very customer-facing, it's very user experience focused, and if you're not delivering fast and often, you're not getting the feedback, and you're probably not building the right product. I'm going to demo a new feature that we have in one of our products later on. That new feature was developed in a continuous delivery manner, so even though it is a packaged app, not a SaaS-based app, we had users basically get updates from us twice a week while we were building it, and the end product is much, much different than what we thought it was going to be. I would claim much, much better too, because we were getting real-life feedback as we're developing. And when you're building out mobile experiences and new experiences, you have to make sure that you're getting that feedback loop very, very frequently. So what is continuous delivery? I don't know what the formal definition is, but this is a definition that came from ThoughtWorks, which is actually my favorite. You have to make releases boring. So a release has to be a non-event. I often go to customers and ask them, so is a release an event or not an event for you guys? And I can tell you 9.9 out of 10 times, it's an event. You call your wife, they tell you, I may be home late today. We have a release. There's anxiety. People are all staying at work late. And that means you're not doing continuous delivery. That means you're doing, high-risk deployments. Very often are, you probably had a lot of issues, otherwise you wouldn't tell everyone to call their wives. And you got to get away from that, right? If you want to be really delivering innovation fast, agile development is not enough. I'm a developer. I always felt good when I built great code, but the reality is that if you're not looking at it as one whole unit, then no matter how good or bad you develop, it's not going to help you. So what we did is we actually went and implemented continuous delivery with a number of clients, and then we actually published a blueprint on our website, which you can download, which actually talk about our opinionated philosophy and what it means to do continuous delivery. Bless you. And that was a continuous delivery of a sneeze. And I say opinionated because we think that continuous delivery, you got to look at it differently than what people have seen in the past. So, a lot of folks I go to and they say, well, we have a CI server, so we're kind of doing continuous delivery. No, you're doing continuous integration, right? But if you want to know that at any point in time you have deployable code, just doing continuous integration and unit testing is not enough. You actually have to have a disciplined way of packaging that application up. You need to have an automated way of deploying that application into a test environment. You need to have automated functional tests. You need to go quite a few steps further than what traditionally people thought of CI, which was a very developer-oriented system, to actually feel a high level of confidence that you could go and deploy into production. So it's a very, very big mindset change. And there's a lot that has to happen around the continuous integration phase. And as I said, this is not the traditional continuous integration, it's part of it, but it's really extending it to static analysis, deployment, testing. It's making sure that all your releases are fully automated. And one of the things people hate doing is being very disciplined on their deployment methodology. People love doing incremental deployments through Git, Git push, and I'm just deploying a few files, I'm getting my images and so on. And it's actually one thing that Java did get right, in my opinion, probably the only thing, except for choose a good name. In Java, you build a self-contained file that has everything you need, right? It's a WAR file, it's basically a glorified zip with some additional information. It's really annoying because it's cumbersome. But the reason why it's so good is because it's very, very disciplined. What you test and test, what goes into staging, what goes into production, there's no chance anything changed. Right? You're not doing incremental deployments or anything. So really implementing the discipline, and there are different solutions. We have a mechanism in our product that does that. You can use RPMs to do that. You can do your own mechanism with zip files. But really the idea is that you have to become very, very disciplined in how you do these deployments. Initially, there's a price. There's a price to change how you're used to doing deployment. How many of you actually do kind of a disciplined deployment that is very constrained? Yeah, so we got a couple of folks here. Didn't you guys talk about Spring before? The Java guys, no?
We were talking about the enemy.
Huh?
They were the enemy.
Oh, okay.
My
I thought I heard you say you're using Spring.
No. The other side of the office where Spring were.
Okay. So you guys deliver fast.
Yes.
They don't.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. The other piece is, automating the infrastructure, right? Making sure that everything is very, very automated from your dev environments to testing, staging, and production. There are different ways of automating. I don't have too much of an opinion on what's better, Puppet, Chef, higher level automation tools, but it's all about making sure that you can recreate a server that's completely consistent automatically. I do think that one of the things that's really pulling workloads into the cloud is the fact that infrastructure automation is easier in the cloud than it is outside the cloud, because resources are very transient, very easy to get, and it's very easy to create a testing environment with 100 servers. We used to do most of our testing on our product in-house on a VMware cloud. The problem was we could only scale to like 30, 40 images. Now we want to test our product on 400 or 500 instances on in an environment, so we started to use Amazon. So we spin that up, test our product, spin it down. Costs us a bit, but it's not too bad if we don't keep it up. But I think what you should take away from this is you don't need to be in cloud to do this. I mean, you can use the same automation tools and same discipline without doing that. And then the third piece is really making sure you're getting real-time feedback. So implementing some level of application performance management, getting real-time feedback. And then I would say most important, actually connecting between development and operations. Because development and operations have to get much closer to each other. And so what we're seeing in a lot of big companies is they're actually reorganizing and starting to move operations very often under the head of development. But at minimum, making sure they're actually working a lot more in concert, because you can't have one side of the organization decide you want to do continuous delivery and the other side decide not to. And now I've got the two, slides for your management. Because what I see a lot is I actually meet devs and I meet DevOps guys who want to do this, but it's incredibly hard to get management to buy in. It's especially as management actually does think that quality and speed are in conflict. I would say quality, speed, and cost. And what continuous delivery actually promises you is that you can actually move faster, increase quality, and reduce costs all at the same time. And why is that the case? It's because you're doing a very high level of automation, right? And so really the promise to management, and by the way, I'm more than happy to send some of these slides to people if you want them. You can increase the pace of innovation. This, I think, is the most important. Increase product market fit, meaning you're actually building what your customer wants, not what you think they want, because you can have them part of the feedback loop on an ongoing basis. You increase the quality, you reduce cost, and you reduce the risk. And a book that I really like to recommend is a book called The Phoenix Project. Has anyone read it here? Okay. The Phoenix Project is a really good book that talks about DevOps in a non-developer way. So someone who's a business owner could actually read this book. It kind of explains to them why these things are important. And we see a lot of companies where it's hard to really get the buy-in to make this level of investment. Our CFO read it, and he's like, wow, this is really great. Now I know what we sell. But one thing, I wanted to now move to something that's a bit more PHP specific. And you know, when we started to work on this whole continuous delivery concept, we basically came to the recognition that everyone is screwing up, and we think there's a missing opportunity here. And the missed opportunity is everyone is thinking of continuous delivery as what happens when code gets checked in. And we were actually thinking, what if we could actually help increase the quality of the code, increase the pace and productivity before it even gets checked in? What then would happen is you would actually reduce a lot of the friction in the continuous delivery cycle and be able to move at a much, much faster pace. And so what we came up with, that's a cool shirt. He's also a bit better looking than me, but so we came up with this idea called Z-Ray, and I'll demo that for you in a second. And it's really the only product demo I'm going to do. The whole idea is actually not to do a product pitch, but actually show you what opportunity we think there is around making, enabling developers in a much, much better way. So we had this idea, if we could give developers X-ray vision into how your code is actually running as you're developing it, and see the problems as you're developing them, problems would not even get checked in, right? So you'd actually solve a lot of those problems early on. And we also did a bit of analysis. We downloaded some applications like Magento and kind of saw, okay, yeah. You guys do Magento work? Downloaded applications like Magento, and we saw, Magento actually ships with some warnings, with some errors, like, performance is really crappy. We kind of saw these problems, and we said, these are problems that it's not that they were bad developers. Is I think they didn't have the tools to actually see these problems. Because my experience with developers and my experience as a developer is if you see the problem, you fix it. The problem is actually getting to see the problem. So we had this whole idea of, we already have a capability of going deep into the runtime, but we've only used that on APM and like production stuff. What if we repurpose the whole visibility we have, but into something that's very focused on actually development? The second conclusion we came to is we can't ask you guys to change how you work, because if you have to change your workflow of code save refresh, you're never going to use it. So we came up with this really neat idea of what if we inject all the information into the application as it's running. And basically, when you're writing a line of code, you're hitting save, you're hitting refresh, you just see the information. So let me demo that for you, if I can actually make that work. This is going to be a bit hard. I'm going to. Oops, does that work? Okay, we may have a bit of a resolution problem here. I didn't take that into account. So I've got a copy of Zend server running on Amazon here in Sydney, which is why it's so fast. Which is not that I want to advertise Amazon, but it actually worked really nicely. And I don't think I've actually seen our product run this fast. I'm only coming into our console to actually get some URLs of deployed applications. So what I'm actually going to go into now is, this is Magento that's actually deployed on Zend server, our product. We didn't make any changes to Magento. So this is basically stuck Magento as it ships right off the press. What you can see here in the bottom, can you see this? Yep. You can see there's this little bar on the bottom of the screen. And the resolution is a bit low, so you can't see the whole bar. But there's this bar on the bottom of the screen. And that bar actually provides a lot of server-side information. So don't think about this like a Google Chrome toolbar or something like that. It's actually bringing in server-side information. It's injected into the page, which means it's completely cross-browser. You can run this on a, it will work on an iPad, iPhone, Firefox, Chrome, and no matter what it is. And the whole idea here was you shouldn't change what you do as a developer. So I'm clicking on a link now in my application, you know, playing around with it, the bar refreshes right away. Now what it starts showing you is information around what exactly happened. So this is a request view. It's actually showing you all the requests that happened within this page. Magento doesn't have Ajax, so it's showing you one request. But if this were an Ajax application, you'd actually see multiple requests, and I'm going to show that to you. It starts showing you breakdown of execution time and so on, so you can start getting a feeling for what this page is. Now, this is not like, well, we have APM capabilities, so do some other vendors, but that's really production and does a lot of aggregation. This is just the code that ran right now. What did it do? You can start seeing that, you know, there's a critical problem here. You know, memory usage. This was taking over 21 megabytes of memory. Only happens with Magento. But we actually use it for our online store, so we like Magento. By the way, I did show this to the Magento guys, so which was kind of interesting, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. But you know, I just don't think they knew, and they knew they had some problems in certain areas. I mean, they knew that, but they didn't get this level of visibility. So, for example, just in this request, 3 undefined variables happening, right? And one of them is called secure. That's kind of, you know, that's kind of scary. But now you get to the really juicy information, which is all the database queries, right? This page did 90 database queries, okay, which is probably, you know, just the number 90 already doesn't sound good. But the thing that you can see here, which you really could never get, is you can see all the detail. Now I know there's some folks here say, well, I can get my MySQL log file. So let me tell you a few things. First of all, most people can't, and definitely not in a production environment. The second thing is, can you really correlate that log file to a specific request and exactly which queries actually correlate? Really, really hard. This is showing you exactly what I executed as part of this request. You also get a backtrace, and you can actually see exactly how that was built and what parameters were passed. So you can do some, you can get a much better understanding, especially for frameworks that actually are getting bottoms up, that are going through several layers of database abstractions where you need to be able to see that. You get profiling information right away. So nothing's new about a profiler. We have a profiler in Zend Studio. It works great. No one uses it, right? And the reason why no one uses it is because people just don't like changing their workflow, right? You're writing code, you're hitting save, you're hitting refresh, setting up the profiler, figuring out how to use it, so on and so forth. People end up not using profilers. Anyone here using profilers on an ongoing basis? Yeah, okay, so we have, you know, 4 people who are using profilers. It should really be everyone. Right, and that's actually, I was talking to Magento and said, well, we have a performance team now working Magento 2 performance and so on. I said, what if every developer on your team were the performance team? Because if you really want to build a high performance app, everyone should be a performance guy, right? And if you can show the minute you can show developers where the bottlenecks are, they're going to fix them, right? I mean, I think developers have a tendency to want to fix problems when they see them. The real problem is you don't see them. So here you actually don't have to do anything special. You just run it, you get profiling information. And then last but not least, and then I'm going to show you something even cooler, you get to see all your session information and so on and so forth. So one of the problems, especially with applications like Magento, should have probably had this closer before. Magento has a lot of different session data, right? You can see in here catalog, checkout, core, customer base, and the more plugins you put in there, the more session data you have. Anyone in here had like incredibly large sessions to deal with? Yeah. Yeah, so about 10 people. So more often than not, I go to customers and they're really embarrassed to tell me their dirty laundry. And one of them is, we have sessions that are a few hundred kilobytes, and some of them even have sessions that are a few megabytes in size. Okay? You're good? You're good against the benchmark? Okay. The problem though is these sessions become so complex, it's really, A, it's hard to know where it's coming from. Second, you actually don't know when your request is running, especially as your session starts to become more complicated, what actually changed, what didn't change, did it actually do what it had to do. So one of the nice things here is you can actually say, hey, I don't want to see any of them changed, I just want to see new entries and changed entries, and it's actually going to show you basically a diff. It's going to show you a diff of your session. Hold on, I want to see. Here it shows your previous value, your new value. So it actually gives you a diff on this request on what changed in your session information. So, what we're really trying to do is change the game, right? We kind of said, okay, the continuous delivery piece was great, and we kind of did what I think is an opinionated version of what some other people are doing too. But why don't we start a lot earlier? If we can change the game at the development level, you still have to do the rest of the automation, but our goal is to basically have our customers barely need our APM capabilities in production, because the code is so good and it's performing so well once it gets there. So that is what I would say version 1 of Z-Ray that we shipped 8 weeks ago. We're about to announce a new version in the end of October at ZenCon. Try not to tweet this, but I won't hunt you. What I wanted to show is an early access build of the next version of Zend Server. It may completely not work. Actually, it most likely won't work. But I'm going to show you, let me see, WordPress. Actually, Drupal. I want to show you Drupal. So there's a couple of just simple stuff we did that looks nicer, like we have syntax highlighting now for the SQL queries. We have exception handling now. So there's a lot of additional capabilities we added. But there's one really cool. Oops. I don't want to. It'd be kind of embarrassing if you saw my playlist, or my son's playlist. But what we did is we added an extensibility API to Z-Ray. We basically are enabling people to build their own plugins. So if you're building your app, you could actually add a plugin to Z-Ray that also exposes application-specific information right around your application. So user that's logged in, what are the plugins that are installed, and so on and so forth. So we give you all the PHP insight, but then you can go up and actually do application-specific information. What we decided to do is we're going to tackle some of the key applications on our own, but then you could do it with your custom apps or other apps that you're using. So we actually partner with Magento, and we're actually building out a Magento plugin, which I can show. Here's an early example of a Drupal plugin. We're going to do Zend Framework, Symfony, WordPress, and basically have pre-created plugins here that actually can give you more specific information. So these are, for example, and I'm not a Drupal expert, so I don't really know what it means, a list of Drupal code functions. So you're actually getting real contextual information that's Drupal specific, not just PHP specific. You can see all the loaded modules in this Drupal instance that actually ran. We're actually looking to get some, Acquia is going to help us with some of this information, so we're going to get it right. This is just an early access. But you actually start to see a lot of information that is not only the PHP level, but it's really at the application level. So if you're doing Drupal work, or you're doing Magento work, or you're doing WordPress work, we're going to start giving you a lot more context. And then let me just go back. Oh, actually, what I want to show you in Drupal. So Drupal is actually the only application here, the Drupal admin interface, that actually has Ajax. So what you can see here, you remember I said it will actually support multiple requests? So every time I hit something that is Ajax, we actually intercept that request and you get another line of request. So I can see just this specific request and I'll get all the information for that specific request. So that's basically what's going to come in October. Now, I wanted to show you just one last thing. This is the first time I'm doing it. Our CTO is really good at doing these demos. I don't do that many demos anymore. But let's see if that actually works. Okay, great. So I'm still on the iPhone 4S. I'm waiting for my iPhone 6. Don't make too much fun of me, of being old-fashioned. But going back to the API first idea, one of the real problems, hold on. Okay. One of the real problems in API first architectures, they're incredibly hard to debug. Okay? First of all, they're hard to debug because they're APIs and not HTML. But then even you don't know where the entry point is coming from, and if it's an Objective-C app, right, you have a real issue because you actually don't know how to trap that call into PHP. And we can't inject Z-Ray because it's not HTML. It's a JSON. It's a REST JSON call. So we're kind of trying to scratch our heads and say, okay, on one hand, we're telling everyone the world's going to an API architecture. On the other hand, this thing can't work if you don't have HTML. So what I'm going to try and show you, if I'm successful, is I downloaded the WordPress app. And that WordPress app is actually pointing at this instance of, hold on. Okay, this WordPress app is actually pointing at this instance of Zend server. So I'm basically going to do something here. Hopefully. And that should be making a request to the server. Okay, and so what you saw is this was actually, the mobile app was actually doing 6 requests to the server. Okay? And so what we're actually doing is we're trapping that on the server side and we're actually giving you Z-Ray for APIs. So what you're going to be able to do here is say, okay, I want to know, okay, I guess this was a cron job. I got an XML RPC request from the WordPress mobile app. And you can actually see all the information I showed you before in this environment. So that's basically going to come out in October, both the mobile capability and the plugins. But the key thing really to take away from this is that not only can you build out a much better dev to production process, and I think that actually the PHP developers are the ones who can influence this process, because you very rarely see the ops guys really taking the leadership around that. They don't understand the application well enough. It's really the DevOps or the dev roles who tend to kind of try and get the organization bought in. So that's one thing, but the other one is, there's starting to be some interesting tools that I think are going to help build much higher quality code a lot earlier, and that's really our goal. By the way, we've tried to make this as easy as possible to get. So while it's a paid product, it's relatively low cost. Zend certified engineers get it for free. So if anyone here is a Zend certified engineer, you're actually entitled to this. Also, open source contributors get it for free. So we have a certain programs to really make sure that folks who are contributing and doing stuff, they can get it. And then we also have a pay-as-you-go option on Amazon, which is very low cost. It's like 3 cents an hour. So for this level of productivity, that's not too bad. So, I saw that half the agenda wasn't written by me, so I kind of have to. I had to put certain pieces together to talk about it. But one of them was PHPNG. So I didn't want to touch on that, which is PHP 7, the next generation of PHP. So there's been, it's been quite a nice improvements in runtimes, both in the JavaScript world and the PHP world. At Zend, we're constantly trying to innovate around the Zend engine, both on functionality and on performance. We went down the route of kind of going and building out a just-in-time compiler for the PHPNet PHP version. What we found was that while just-in-time compilers are nice, that was really not the main bottleneck that PHP had. The main bottleneck that PHP had was memory management, data types, and how we were actually handling all those complex things inside the engine. Now, just so you know that for most applications, and Magento is a good example, no matter how fast you make the runtime, it's not going to make a difference because database and I/O is usually the bottleneck, right? So to truly make a difference in application performance, not only do you have to improve the runtime, you actually have to improve I/O and database access. There's a problem coming up, I think, in IT, which is more and more applications are starting to become dependent on cloud services. Cloud services, by definition, are slow. And so I think the bottleneck is, I think actually the nature of the bottlenecks is going to become more and more difficult and challenging for everyone. So I would love to promise you a better world. And I'm just giving that caveat because no matter what benchmarks I'm going to show you, we're actually heading down a cliff, which is scary. If you're building an application in Amazon and you're using RDS, you may be connecting to Salesforce and to Facebook Connect, you're building in bottlenecks that are going to be very hard to solve. And the reality is it probably doesn't matter that much because you can scale out and deal with those things in different ways. But anyway, so once we decided that we found the bottlenecks, we basically changed course, stopped working on JIT, and we decided to completely refactor the Zend engine. And we completely redid data types and everything. And that's what then became known as kind of codename PHPNG, PHP Next Generation. We proposed that to the PHPNet community to take that as the next version of PHP. That was broadly accepted. And then I think it had like a 94 or 97% yes vote rate. And then also there was a whole discussion around PHP 6 versus PHP 7. Anyone here follow that agonizing discussion? Okay. Anyone here in the PHP 6 camp? Oh, okay. Anyway, our camp won. Next version is going to be called PHP 7. Really, main reason is because there was a PHP 6 effort in the past. We didn't want there to be confusion that when people Google PHP 6, they find the wrong information. So kind of very simple pragmatic reason. We said PHP 7, let's start fresh, and so on. So PHPNG is going to come in PHP 7. My guesstimate is it's going to be out in about 12 months from now. But it runs, and it runs everything, and it runs really well. So, and there's going to be not only PHPNG and PHP 7, there's going to be other things that are going to happen. But just to give you a sense of kind of the progression of what's happening in PHP, this is PHP 5.4 without an opcode cache. Now, you may have seen benchmarks out there of folks that start with an H against PHP 5.4. A lot of those benchmarks are without opcode cache. It's a bit, not quite where things are at, but I just used that to kind of show kind of where that was. Zend contributed our opcodes cache to PHP 5.5. So before PHP 5.5, there was Zend Optimizer Plus, there was APC, Xcache, eAccelerator. There were a lot of opcode caches. We basically decided to open source ours and contribute it to PHPNet. So basically from PHP 5.5, that's what you get. That was the fastest opcode cache in the market, and that basically comes with PHP 5.5. PHP 5.6 is moderately faster on this Sugar CRM. I'm going to show you some other benchmarks. But what you can see is a huge change when PHPNG comes out. And PHPNG is that version that basically has all the data types changed and uses much less memory and is much, much faster. Our favorite Magento benchmark. Notice the difference in scale. This is in hundreds of requests per second. This is in tens. But again, we're happy users, so I like bashing them, but we love Magento, so we don't have anything negative about them. But you can see, same thing, really good impact of the new runtime. But again, I'll caveat that by most of your bottlenecks are going to be database and I/O. We can't accelerate that. All right, use tools to find those problems and solve them ahead of time. And then here, just some examples of PHPNG versus PHP 5.6 against multiple applications. What you can see, it can already run any application. So Magento, Sugar CRM, WordPress, Drupal, Symfony, Zend framework, and you can see a very big improvement in performance. So that's about it, and I'm more than happy to open it to Q&A now. I like to leave you with this quote: to improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often. We've done a lot of that at Zend. There's actually a lot of things that we've changed, a lot of things that we're changing in PHP. But in your own organization, one of the reasons why I really wanted to emphasize things like continuous delivery versus talking about PHP, because PHP is already there. PHP runs over 50% of the internet. Some statistics put it at 75%. It's by far the most dominant web development language. But it's in how PHP is being applied and how it's being used and how you in your own universes are building out a true, what I would call industrial strength, right, dev to production environment. That's really what's going to help solidify PHP's footprint in enterprise applications and also in your own organizations, right? Because I hear all the time, I get feedback on like, well, Java's got a really mature release automation methodology and PHP doesn't, so we got to be, doing Java. And you hear that about all sorts of topics. The reality is it exists in PHP, right? We just have to implement it. And not only do we have to implement it, given that PHP has an affinity to these new workloads that are disrupting the market, it has to be a competitive advantage for PHP. It is so much easier to do continuous delivery with PHP than it is to do with Java. And I would say not only PHP, I would put all the dynamic languages in that bucket, right? I happen to think PHP is the best, but I would say all dynamic languages are changing the pace of innovation within companies. Well, here's my email address, also my Twitter, so feel free to contact me however you want. And if we have some time, I can take some questions.
Well, first of all, I think it's probably great to thank Andy for an excellent talk. Thank you very much. So, folks, in terms of questions, who's got a question for Andy? Okay, I'll go straight to Peter here. Here we go, say.
I wonder if you've been watching the Zend and Zephyr development and some of the changes they're making to PHP to get the compiler speed hints, and will that be in PHP 7?
So, to be honest, I've kind of heard about it. I haven't looked at it into too much detail. So I guess it's not going to be in PHP 7 probably, not as far as I know. I don't know enough about it to comment. Everything that we've looked at says that you can actually get to pretty close to native performance on dynamic languages. As I said, the bottlenecks tend to be more in I/O and network. So, I don't know what use case that addresses, but there's always a concern of compatibility, I think, when you have C++ implementations, and it's much harder to change them when something small changes in PHP, changing that. But the reality is I don't know enough about it to have a very smart answer on that.
Folks, anybody else with a question there? Yeah, I'll pass over the mic to yourself.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks. Yeah, that was a great speech there. I just have one question. Actually, if I can ask two questions.
Sure.
I'm really interested in the Z-Ray thing because I actually coded something similar, but it's not as great. And I just wonder, does that have to work with your, your server PHP Zend?
Yeah, so basically Z-Ray is part of Zend server.
Okay.
And but Zend server basically it's stock PHP. So it's basically, you know, there's no difference in the PHP we ship. The only difference is we do security fixes and long-term support for it.
Right. Because the fact is we're running the traditional LAMP stack, right?
Yeah.
So do you guys consider open sourcing that thing?
So we're definitely not considering open sourcing it.
Yes, 3 cents per hour.
So, you know, all these, well, you know, all these things we were talking about, like, you know, PHP 7 and Zend framework and Apigility and Eclipse PDT, they all cost money. We're gonna fund that. So you would be helping fund those projects, if you paid us. Just so you know, it's actually, we priced it intentionally what we call relatively low. I mean, for the value. I mean, it's at a tool price. It's $195 per year, which really is not very expensive.
Okay.
We used to charge more for development, but we felt that Zero was something we really wanted to get out broadly. We decided we're going to price it like any tool, like a PHP Storm, like a Zend Studio. But you know, we are the traditional LAMP stack, so there's actually no difference between, as I said, the PHP that's in Zend Server is the PHP you would get from an operating system. The main difference is that we can do multiple versions of PHP on the same operating system versus just going for the operating system PHP. So it's even better, I would say.
Yeah. All right.
What's the second question?
It's actually about PHP 7.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I don't know, but you mentioned something about reducing the memory usage and also work out the types. Are you going to start using strong typing now?
So it's actually not related. So the question was, in PHP 7, are we going to support strong typing? So it's actually a very long philosophical debate, right, on whether we should or shouldn't.
Sorry for bringing this up.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the big advantages of dynamic languages is actually they're not strongly typed. And when you get your input variable from a get, that's a string, that it will actually auto-convert to a number if you're getting the number. Now, there are certain abilities of like type hinting and so on. So there's some discussion around some level of type hinting. We've already had some. But, you know, the reality is if we make it too strictly typed, I think you actually lose a lot of the benefit. Now, in the runtimes don't really need strong typing to run at native speed. What you actually learn from like the work that was done around V8 and some of the JavaScript engines is you can anticipate types and you can run it pretty close to native speed even if you don't know the type, because the types, what actually happens is types in scripts are a lot more consistent than you would think. So.
Thanks.
But there's a language called Java that is strictly typed. And, you won't be delivering fast.
Well, enough Java, please. That was a really good couple of questions, and I even heard somebody say at the front here, yes, you read my mind about whether you had to have Zend Server or not. Just on the subject of tools, how many people use PHP Storm or WebStorm? Just quick show of hands. So quite a few people are, right? Yeah, quite a lot of folks are. From that point of view, there was actually just a webinar put out by the folks at JetBrains the other night. There was a tweet about it, so I'll make sure you tweet it and ping you guys a note about it as well. But it does actually look really good for getting started, getting how to get that integrated. So, separate nugget of information. Who else has a question for me? There we go. Share voice machine.
Sorry. Hi, thanks for the presentation. It was great. I was wondering, in terms of Z-Ray, if we enable it in a production environment, does it have an impact on performance? Because we catching all those MySQL queries, catching all
Okay,
those
it's a great question. The question is, can you actually enable Z-Ray in a production environment? And if so, what is the cost? So, it's a long answer, and I'll explain that. I'll explain in a second. General APM and monitoring, whether it's what we have in Zend Server, what New Relic does, or App Dynamics, or so on, will focus on performance in production, aggregation, and basically lose data when we need to, right? So we have that capability. We do production monitoring, and we can give you some pretty decent insight onto slow SQL queries and so on. Z-Ray, or Z-Ray in Australia, we see that as a very different technology, which is really showing in context, contextual information about a specific request on page, right? And so the idea of and the way we do that is we collect a lot of information, right? And if we were collecting that for every single request in production, or even filtered, that would be very, very expensive, and it would be slow. So, but what we did hear from our early beta testers was, well, when we have a really bad production issue though, the information that we can get out of Z-Ray, right, is much, much better than what we can get out of an APM tool. So could you give us a production option? So what we basically did was we did that, and we built a really cool way of using it in production. There's basically a two-phase authentication method, and we help you create an expiring URL, okay? And so your ops guys could actually give a developer that URL. You log into your production environment, and your session has Z-Ray, no one else has Z-Ray. And so it doesn't slow down the server because it's only happening for your session. It's secure and compliant because the only information you see is your own. But the reality is, in most situations, if your production environment is having problems, you're going to see it in yours, right, as much as you're going to see it somewhere else. So the answer is yes, it does work in production. And the whole notion of that is that it's very specific. It's very specific to a specific user session. And I don't know how to demo that. But it's very easy to basically create. You get the URL, you decide how long you want it to work for, an hour, 10 hours, or whatever, and you can send that out. And that's also part of what we try and do is improve the collaboration between dev and ops, and make sure that, operations gets a bit, scared of giving devs a lot of access to operations. So what we have is we have a read-only mode for Zend Server in general, so you can actually give your lead developer an ability to see all the performance metrics and configuration, but then also Z-Ray can be even more specific to a specific person.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, folks. It looks like we've got a few more questions here. Charles, did you have a question?
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for your presentation. I have a question. Why Zend console or stop the Zend cloud? I got an email, and Zend cloud should shift to Amazon the cloud. What's the reason?
Okay, so the question was, why did Zend stop the Zend Developer Cloud? So basically, we started the Zend Developer Cloud, I think it was back in 2011, if I recall correctly. We really wanted to help developers onboard the cloud and get a bit of a cloud development experience. And so we had this environment that we were giving away, what I would say, dev-only workload for free, right, where you could actually start experiencing the cloud. The Dev Cloud really helped us build out, learn a lot about how to deploy Zend Server in the cloud. And then we started to form partnerships around Zend Server with different cloud providers. So, Zend Server today is on Red Hat OpenShift, we have an Amazon offering, and we started to build that out in Cloud Foundry. You have a Cloud Foundry option, so we kind of started to build out an ecosystem. So really the main reason why we stopped was we figured that the ecosystem is mature now, and as you're using more and more of the cloud service provider services, it really makes sense to develop where you're going to deploy. Like if you're going to deploy in Red Hat OpenShift, you're better off developing there. If you're going to deploy in Amazon, you're better off developing in Amazon. So that was really the main reason, was we felt like that ecosystem was broad enough, and we had both free and paid options. Like you can get us for free on OpenShift, on Amazon you can get us at a pretty low cost, 30-day free trial. Then I think it's like, the minimum is like 4 cents an hour, which is like $24 a month. So you have your free choices right now with like OpenShift, or you can go paid. But we felt we just felt it made the most sense to help kind of make the next transition.
Good. Okay, folks. So I think we've probably got time for maybe one, maybe 2 more questions. So, I think that's it. Pete, may I come back to you, sir?
Thank you, Andy, for the amazing speech. We've developed our own framework to which we've created our in-house software. I personally develop on Zend server
Mhm.
on my local machine.
Mhm.
On our production machine, we don't have it running. How does Zend server work with custom applications or custom frameworks that aren't your WordPress or your Drupal or your Magento? Like, what are the benefits of Zend server compared to just your native stack?
Okay, so great question. So first of all, Zend server is completely framework agnostic. It's basically a LAMP stack. Going back to that. It's basically a value add LAMP stack. It will run anything. There's really two big groups of value there. One is the Red Hat model. So we will do long-term support and security fixes, like PHP 5.3 was end of life by the community in August. No more security fixes. Lots of PHP 5.3 applications out there. In most cases, it doesn't make real business sense to try and upgrade. You know, it has to be on the terms of the business. So we will basically backport security fixes for quite a long time for customers on different operating systems, right? Then on top of that, there's a lot of value added with things like Z-Ray, a lot of DevOps automation capabilities, high availability in clustering. You know, you can do one web API deployment of the 200 server cluster, and then a rollback functionality and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of capabilities around management, performance, scalability, and so on and so forth. So, you know, if you're interested to kind of know more, let me know afterwards. I mean, we can arrange a demo or something like that.
Well, I'm in the phase of porting over our framework to another, probably a more performing server. So I'm in that stage of.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah. I mean, it's completely framework agnostic. And actually, the whole idea of the Z-Ray extensions for specific apps came after we built extension API. Like first we said, let's build an extension API that just lets people plug in information from wherever they want. Once we kind of saw that idea was really interesting, we started to talk to folks like Magento, like, hey, why don't we just pre-create some? So the real idea here is to have a full ecosystem of everything that's possible.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You know, okay, folks. So I think Pete, you're quite desperate to ask one last question. I think so. We'll make this the last question, and thanks for that.
With the Z-Ray, you mentioned logging or running on servers. I mean, if you're running 5,000 automated tests, and you've got something that goes wrong around test 4,000, how easy is it just to look at that little bit?
So Z-Ray is not really focused at helping you with Z-Ray is not really focused at helping you with automated testing. We've had some ideas on how you could potentially get some of that information, but frankly, in automated testing, you probably use our APM capabilities more than you would use Z-Ray. So we do have monitoring, and that can create alerts. And I didn't go specifically here into how Zend server solves these problems. I just want to talk about the concept. But one of the things that we advocate is when you're actually doing the continuous integration testing, right? There's one thing of having tests pass and fail, but given that we already have monitoring for PHP, there are problems that happen under the covers that you actually don't see as part of your testing result. Everything in Zend server is an API. So we built this product as a complete API-enabled platform. So the idea was that we could actually feed monitoring alerts into the CI environment and actually fail the test mechanism by actually also getting some white box information, not just black box. So there's definitely a way to use those capabilities to test, to fail tests that otherwise wouldn't have shown up as failed tests. So, yeah.
I think one of the key things that I took away from what you were saying was it was all about what can you do before you get to that stage, before getting to the automated testing. We were already identifying things that you couldn't see before.
But I think, I think all is important, but I think what we're doing with we're doing all the rest also, and we have a lot of SDKs like Puppet, Chef, Jenkins, Bamboo, so we kind of have plugins for Zend server to help basically, we codify the best practices on how to make this work, but I think what I felt was special around Z-Ray is it's something that no one else is doing. no one else has actually thought about what happens just before the code actually gets checked in. No.
Probably the most powerful thing for me is the queries. Yeah, because when it gets, well, I know myself from working with Zend framework and various other frameworks here in the situation where query abstraction languages where you can say to someone, well, yeah, what does the code say?
So one of our early access.
Yeah, that's it. What does the code say? Most people,
Right.
you know, they may not be able to tell you until they see something.
So one of our early access customers is BNP Paribas, which is one of the 5 biggest banks in the world, and they had an Oracle performance issue, and they just couldn't figure it out. And you know, in a bank like that, there's like no chance you're going to get access to any Oracle logs or anything. So like, okay, you know, let's just take the application, run it on this early access version, and they found a problem like that. We got scared because like, okay, you shouldn't really be running, you know, the first thing it says is don't use this in production. So, you know, they may have not, you know, maybe ultimately they didn't really use it in production, they just try to, you know, find the problem with it, but we started getting scared.
Good. Well, you know, from that point of view, I think we're pretty much out of time for questions. There'll be an opportunity, I guess, to catch up afterwards. But
You can come up here afterwards.
yeah, absolutely. That's it. Andy's certainly not shy from that point of view. We've got the details there. We can always get in touch. Just want to say once again, thanks a lot for coming all the way to see us here. It's been great, and the content, everybody's looking forward to it.
Well, thanks a lot for organizing this, and you know, we really appreciate it. So.
No worries. Well, yeah, this is it. Jack and myself, we're pleased to make it happen. And of course, glad to have been working in here with you. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. One more thing, of course, folks, is that we do have an array of lovely things, and Jack is coming towards the front to Andy with the vase of destiny.
Is this Patty? Jack?
Is that the elephant?
Is it too late for calls? I think we can get a last round.
Look, I think there's probably the opportunity if you haven't already put a business card in. Dave, you've already put 6
Small
business
one.
cards in. That's one heck of a business card there, so we're going to need a new vase. There we are. So we do have a very exciting box full of exciting things, so thought it might be a nice idea to pull a few names and business cards out of here. And since everybody who's here should have one here, we shouldn't have any prizes not claimed. So if you would like to take the vase of destiny to Mr. Andi Gutmans, that'd be wonderful there, Jack.
So wait, so who gets what? Huh?
So,
I will.
so if you would like to reach in at random, sir, and pick something from the box of goodies, please. Yeah, pick something from the box out, and then we'll pick something from the vase of destiny. Oh, here we go. Woo, yeah. Charles Liu, there you go, sir. Well done. Congratulations, sir. It was obviously a stroke of luck. Yeah, feel free just to. I think if you maybe grab a couple more, and then because we do have quite a few things, we might end up having to just throw a few of these things out. But we must encourage lack of violence. Whoa! So, whoa! Fantastic. Absolutely. So,
those were the less prized possessions.
yes, those were the less prized possessions. Well, we could go through 14. I think we go through a couple more, and then maybe we just throw a few out. What do you guys think? Is that excite everybody just a little bit more than drawing names out of it? Okay, right. We'll pick a couple more names. Okay, so 2 more names, and then
we gotta pick some names.
yeah, absolutely.
He's going to throw them further back, though.
Yes.
So
Raymond Antonio.
Raymond Antonio. Yeah, here you are, sir. An elephant, sir. Are you?
James O'Toole.
James O'Toole, an elephant for you. Fantastic.
And Kenneth Scott Huntley.
Kenneth Scott Huntley. There's a man who was desperate for an elephant. Earlier on today, tweeted that this would make his day. How wonderful. Awesome. Alrighty, folks. Well, I think probably best to just throw a few things out here. Wouldn't it be nice? Yeah, here we go. Thanks very much. Here we are, folks. Hey! Oh! There's something in the ceiling. How exciting. It's very nice. Yes.
We need to throw up back.
We do actually, don't we? We do. How good's your throw? You throw one there, Jack, because my throw is not very good, as we know. Whoop! Hey! Absolutely. Now, there are a few flashlights there.
Fortunes for these
What's that?
Do you have one?
Actually, no, I don't. Oh.
I think you do.
Oh, thank you very much. That's good. Thank you. Thank you. We shall live in the farm, not the kind of farm that you take your dog to when it's, a little bit older. We actually do have a farm around the corner. We've got a beach there and a farm around the corner. Thank you very much indeed. We've got a few more things here, folks. We got actually this looks like it would be pretty much.
I suggest these are for kids, people with kids.
Yeah, people
Like
with
little
kids.
flashlights.
Who has kids? Suddenly everybody who doesn't have kids. Justin, you don't have kids. But you are a big kid, so you can have one. Yeah, absolutely.
Not going to throw these ones.
Absolutely. That's very nice. Folks,
One more shirt.
absolutely. One more shirt. One more shirt.
I'll just give it to you.
We'll check if you have this one.
So, here it goes.
Completely.
Oh! I really should keep my eyes open and the microphone on. Yeah, okay, folks. Well, that quickly descended into lots of excitement. I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of you guys for coming along as well. One of the reasons that the PHP community is as strong as it is now, I've got to take a moment and think back, actually, to around about May time in 2012. Some of you guys might remember at that point in time that Graham Weldon and Tim Chandler, those guys were doing a great job of making sure that there was really great content for these meetups. We were over at Sydphp Mechanics School of Art, and there was always really great stuff happening, but then those two guys just around about the same time ended up heading off into different lands. We had Graham going out there to become a platform as a service engineer out in Japan, and then we had Tim going out to Malaysia as well. So they needed people to step up, and I think that where the community is now, it's in a really strong place. I think it's much stronger even than where it was now. And looking around the room now, you can see that it's really great. And we can continue to make this happen. We can continue to make it better. So at the end of the month, it'd be great to see you guys again coming along. It's going to be King Street Brewhouse at the end of the month. Great to see you all there. It's always great to make new friends and continue to meet with the guys we already know. So hope to see you there. Thank you very much. Now, what's that, sorry?
Email goes out
Yes,
tonight.
the email goes out tonight, so we want to see lots of RSVPs, lots of RSVPs there. So one thing as well, we do actually have something which Jack is running towards the back of the room. And of course, you can see that. You don't need me to give you the commentary, but sometimes a bit of commentary makes life all the more exciting. We just wanting to say again one big thank you to Andy for coming along and presenting here tonight. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you.